Welcome to On the Table with Ashley. This is our food and connection series that explores the many ways people create connection through food, from community gardens and classrooms to dinner tables across the world. The series highlights stories of gathering nourishment, memory, and care. Through insightful conversations with experts from all walks of life, the vulnerable conversations shared over dinner, the scents and recipes that carry memories of home, and the grassroots efforts communities make to combat food insecurity and support one another. Through these conversations, we examine how food unites people, preserves culture, conjures memory, and creates identities. Ultimately, the series reveals the profound role food plays in nearly every human experience. Our guest today is Alphonse Griger. Alphonse is a chef and culinary innovator whose career has spanned restaurant kitchens, culinary research, and food and beverage development. He studied at Johnson & Wales University, graduating in 2019, and has worked in Chicago's culinary industry as a line cook, research and development chef, and sous chef. He is part of the team behind Chicago's Class Act and Nightcap, an immersive fine dining and cocktail experience. Enjoy.
Alphonse Griger, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm really looking forward to talking with you about your love of food and how you have turned that into a career, specifically today in our series.
Pleasure to be here.
So I always like to start hearing a little bit about where you grew up and what kind of kid you were when you were young.
Me as a kid. I mean, a lot of me as a kid stems into where I am today, as it does for most people. But I grew up in the middle of the woods, Pennsylvania. The way I like to describe it is woods, trees, and rivers. There's not much else there. It took me about 30, 40 minutes to school every day, so a very small area in the middle of the woods, just on the border of New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania. Grew up in a family of 5, very classic middle-class American family at that time. But as I progressed through school, I always had an interest in science. So I worked through my classes and whatnot, but hit a hurdle in middle school with some of my teachers and didn't end up getting placed in some of the classes. When I moved into high school, my mom was like, oh, they offer a VOTEC program in around food. And she was like, you love eating food. Why don't you cook it too? So that's kind of where it all started as far as my career. But growing up, family meals were always a huge part of growing up. We were required to sit down every single day and have a meal with the family. Even if we didn't have anything left that was going to be cooked, like Fridays in my house were always leftover days. So we would make meals throughout the week, and Friday was always whatever was left in the fridge, you're eating it. So that was very integral to growing up and whatnot. And even with extended family, every year we would get together, having Italian background, we would get together and just have these huge feasts of different foods, different cultures coming together.
So when you were growing up, did you help cook or did you just love to eat?
Yeah, no, I definitely helped cook. I was right there alongside my mom. One of those very classic old family style recipe books she had. She would handwrite everything. She got recipes from her grandma, and from my dad's side, she would get recipes from them, and they would all just be written in there. Or she'd take clippings out of magazines and she would put them in there, and then she would cook them for us. She always had her staples like meat pot pie or lasagna or chicken and gravy with rice. Very, very traditional things that I grew up eating. So.
Did you make pasta by hand?
We did not, no.
Okay.
we bought box pasta. Despite my parents always being advocates to sit down and have meals every single day, not to bash on them, they weren't the greatest cooks. But growing up in that household, you don't know any better until you leave and you get better foods.
So as part of this series, I spoke with a food historian named Ken Aliba, and one of the things that he's written a bunch of books, and one of them was about the ritual of eating in different cultures. And the one through line that he found was that the family dinner is dying, and that is not just a shame, but actually I think in many ways something we should be very concerned about as a society, because around the table, not only are we breaking bread, and we'll talk about this with Class Act, which is an organization that you've been involved with, which I think is super, super interesting to engender community and connection and all of those things, but it's also sort of a safe place where we can learn to disagree respectfully. And if we don't learn that around the table with people that we love and trust and are safe with, then there's, I think, a there's a growing concern that we're just not learning how to do that. And I think we're seeing the signs of that in our societies. The food might not have been perfect, but the ritual was. And I'm really eager to hear kind of the impact that's had on your life and your career and how you're sort of pulling that through today. So you've spent a lot of time in research and development in the food industry, and maybe you can just explain to listeners what that actually means.
Usually when I have to explain, like when people come up to me, they're like, what is your job? And I have to say I'm a corporate research and development chef. They're like, what is that? And I didn't know that was a thing. And it's a lot of hats in one. What I primarily do is I work for consulting agencies that work entail with what we call operators. So that would be your chain restaurants like McDonald's or Burger King, etc., with manufacturers who produce the actual products that go into those restaurants. So that could be something like the brand of potatoes that are used to make the French fries, that kind of thing. We work for them on behalf of them to sell those products into these operators. So that's a lot of what I do in my field. But there's a lot of things that surround it. It can involve anything from producing products utilizing those products that we're selling, or going on what we call market research tours, where we're going to markets and spending anywhere from 2 days to a week immersing ourselves in different foods around certain topics to see what trends are coming up, what different foods people are consuming in those markets, because a lot of times you may not see everything that is interesting online. I think that's one of the great things about traveling the world is you get a different perspective in these food markets of what they are eating locally and what is eaten by the masses, as opposed to what you're eating in your closed bubble of your city or your community.
Tell us about one of those. When you go on those trips, are they ex-US or are they in the United States?
They vary. The ones that are usually outside of the U.S. are usually the ones that are a week long, because obviously you're taking a flight, it's probably going to be anywhere from 6 to 14 hours from the U.S. So you want a little bit more time, not only to transition of that time difference, but also it takes a while to get there. The international ones, they're about a week long. Domestic ones within the U.S., it's pretty easy to fly around. I'm based in Chicago, so it's about 3 to 4 hours to anywhere at furthest in the U.S. So you just fly over there, and it takes about a day and a half to 2. We fly in the morning, do a little dinner at night, and then the next day we do a whole, eat at like eight different restaurants or beverage places. And then if we have an extra day, we'll do the same thing the following, recap that following day, and then fly out. I didn't participate in a lot of the international trips that was happening at the company that I was working for at the time. It was for a bean company, and I'm sure you can understand where this is going. They really wanted to see what the market of beans were internationally. So they went to London, and they, for 6 days straight, just ate every single bean item you can imagine in London.
You were glad not to be on that trip. So in the United States, let's say you're working for a potato company, and or maybe you can give us an example of one that you went on. I'm interested in, is the company having you do this so that you go and observe these restaurants or eating establishments and see what, observe and taste, and so that you can make recommendations on where they can sell their product? Or are you trying to see ahead, around the corners, where is the market going, which has to be somewhat difficult because people's preferences seem to change culturally, geographically, all of these variables.
It's a combination of both. I mostly did a lot of beverage development when I was at the previous company that I was doing the corporate work for underneath Coca-Cola. So I would work on behalf of Coca-Cola for these operators to understand what they should be doing. We all know Coca-Cola, they have their set products, and there's only so many ways you can paint up that different product. So we really would go into markets and see how a lot of the smaller operators, so they're in independent restaurants or beverage chains, are actually utilizing these products. So something like, if you've ever been into Utah or whatnot, Swig or whatnot, or even a Dutch Bros, they love just doing weird, wacky combinations, everything under the sun.
I'm in Utah, so yes, I'm very aware of Swig.
Yeah, so you don't get that here in Chicago. And what we usually see is a lot of our trends start on the West Coast and they move over to the East Coast, and we get that adoption that happens over like a 5-year time frame. So whatever you see on the West Coast, you'll probably end up seeing in 5 years on the East Coast. And we like to like kind of categorize that in a few different ways. There's like 4 different categories, and that's inception, which is really where it starts. And then they move into adoption. It's where like some of the more smaller chains start utilizing those techniques or flavor profiles. And then it moves into proliferation, where that's probably where you'll start seeing it pop up in like food blogs or in like some of the larger chains or like some of your like local restaurants that are well established. So like people have heard of it, they know the flavor, but it's not everywhere yet. And then we move into something that's like ubiquity, where everyone has seen it. It's done over 1 million times. So something like strawberry flavor, that's a ubiquitous flavor. Proliferation would be something like Dubai chocolate when it came out, 2-3 years ago. That
or
was
like ube. I'm seeing ube everywhere now.
Yeah, a lot of those like Filipino or Korean flavors are super huge, and I think a lot of that stems out of there's a large push for like bakeries right now. Post-pandemic, I think there's like good margins and whatnot on bakeries, and you're able to really experiment and showcase a lot of your creativity and your culture through these pastries on a platform that like, a croissant. Everyone's seen a croissant, but as soon as you put ube on a croissant, they're like, whoa, never seen this before. And it's really true to who they are as a person. And I think that drives a lot of brands nowadays, is that personality.
So it's so interesting. And it sounds like a similar kind of thing for food, which I hadn't really thought about. So I don't know, maybe you can tell us a little bit about your educational background and training. Like, how do you become good at seeing observing what's happening and trying to figure out what is actually going to stick and what is going to fade?
Yeah, that's a tricky question, and I think a lot of people still struggle to figure that out in my line of work. I have a traditional background in my education. Like, I went to college, got a degree in culinary science initially, and then switched over into nutrition with a focus in research and development. So like, I did go to school for this, but also they didn't really teach you the like nitty gritty of like really understanding trends and how to follow those and predict them so that you can develop products for markets. It was really that base structure of like, how do you do it, not why do you do it kind of situation. So as I moved into the fields, and I spent about 3 years at this previous company doing this corporate R&D, you slowly learn that like it's very different from a traditional restaurant in the way you develop products for consumers or guests if you're in a restaurant scenario. It's because you think it's interesting and you also think the guests may like it, but really it's for you first and then the customer. Whereas when you look at a corporate setting, it's very much customer first, what do they like, and then it's what you like. So moving into corporate, I really had to understand and kind of put my pride behind me and say like, this is what is going to sell versus actually what I like. So one of my like best and most successful products that I developed was for Burger King about 2 years ago. They had a spicy strawberry Sprite that launched with their fiery line, and I developed that for them. But it was that combination that was super interesting because people like heat. Strawberry is one of the if not the top flavor in beverages, and it was on a carrier of lemonade, which everyone's had before growing up. I find it hard to believe if someone hasn't had lemonade in their life. But that whole innovation of figuring that out didn't come from us actually doing the research and understanding what the consumer wanted. It was actually a fluke thing that happened. During the presentation that I was doing that this stemmed out of, I had some boba in the back on the counter. It was a spicy boba. And we were doing a beverage presentation on an adjacent topic. It was around beverages, but none of the beverages were spicy. And towards the end of the session, I had all the operators come up to the counter, and we were just messing around with different flavors and different like toppings and inclusions we had. And we tried out the boba with strawberry and lemonade, and everyone was just like, this is weird, this is unique, we love it, no one's has done this before. And it ended up going to market, and from what I heard, it drove about a 15% increase nationwide in their sales. And now we see spicy drinks popping up all over the place. So sometimes it's predictable. That one was not, and it ended up working out. And when it is predictable, it's a lot of times it's items that you are super familiar with that you've added one additional ingredient on. I like to use a burger concept. Like everyone knows a classic burger. It's, it's a burger with cheese, usually mayo, and probably lettuce and tomato with a pickle. In corporate, it's like, okay, take that, and then let's add one additional ingredient onto it, and you've reinvented the wheel, and they push it out as a new concept, and it sells millions, So versus a restaurant where it's like you're layering lots of different flavors or techniques onto it. So there's a big contrast between the two, and that's kind of how I went about figuring out what the masses wanted, and generally speaking, it worked. I had a lot of different menu launch items over the 3 years.
It's so fascinating. You have done both, working on creating products for the masses, like for Burger King, for very large chains, and you've also worked in very small settings. Maybe tell us about this project in Jordan.
Yeah. So I guess we can place like where I am in my timeline of career. So I had come to Chicago for my internship, didn't get picked up afterwards, and then I started jumping around at different jobs in Chicago. Ended up landing at a restaurant in Fulton Market here in Chicago, initially to be the sous chef, but they didn't end up hiring an executive, so I went from a line cook to an executive chef overnight, opened up that concept, and then 2 months later they opened up another concept next door, so I ended up being an executive chef of 2 restaurants in the course of 2 months, during the middle of COVID nonetheless. So doing all that was really a trial by fire. I wouldn't wish it upon anyone, but I also wouldn't change it. It was a very difficult time in my life, but I learned a lot. And towards the end of that experience, I randomly got cold called on LinkedIn from some person over in Jordan, and I was like, oh, like when you go on LinkedIn, you see like another message just popped up, and you check it. Usually, it's some type of recruiter reaching out to you, or like a school trying to get you to come for their program. And this was a normal guy. I was like, okay, let me entertain this conversation. And after talking with him for a bit, I jumped on a few video calls with him, like late in the night because of the time difference. Eventually, it came to the point where he's like, yeah, I want you to come over. I have a burger chain, and I'm looking for an American, like, palate and expression on the menu. So we ended up sorting out a deal and whatnot. And at this time, I was like, this seems super sketchy, like looking back on it. Towards the end of COVID, restrictions are still kind of in play. At the time also in the Middle East, there was some conflicts, so like they were shooting missiles around. It wasn't fun. On top of that, I had never flown on a plane before. I had never been out of the country. I needed to get a passport for this. I developed some menu items for this guy, and I go over there. This was very much a culture shock in the best and worst way. There was a lot of things that I learned while over there that I just wasn't ready for. At the time, I was only 22 years old. So for me to do all of these things at 22 years old, given the state of the world, was wild looking back on it. I think some of the biggest hurdles that I ran into and learned from while I was over there was like every culture has, as we were talking before, like you're like, how do you know what someone or the masses are going to like? And I think this is really where I understood like each culture likes different things for different reasons, and no matter how much you try and push something, they're gonna like it no matter what. Things over there like spices, so much stronger, which for justified reasons, when you think about it, a lot of our spices that we get here in the US don't come from the US, they come from overseas. So when you go over there, they're gonna be a lot more fresher and whatnot. So all of my recipes were about 5 times weaker in flavor versus when I went over there, they were 5 times stronger. So I had to adjust all that, like lemons and limes, they're all green over there. And I was like, what is this? This is just a lime. He's like, nope, that's a lemon. And I was like, cool, way different. Like, I don't know if this is just like my experience when I was over there, but it really felt like a lot of the Jordanian culture is built on family units and the hierarchy via age. So I really struggled while I was over there trying to teach a 40-something-year-old executive chef of their brand as a 22-year-old how he should be cooking. It felt like there was a lot of animosity, and also like I didn't speak, if any at all, Arabic, so I couldn't like really communicate that well with him. But we worked through it and we made some stuff work out. I learned a lot while I was over there. And the way they work as a society as a whole. It was super unique the way they're such a close-knit community. I was looking at the breakdown of the Jordanian culture actually, and about half of them are actually Palestinian, and then it kind of breaks down a little bit more as far as like Israelis, Egyptians, and Syrians. But to think that half of their population really are people who didn't come from that area is quite a shocking realization. I felt that a lot while I was there. I would very often go out with some of the staff that were at the restaurants, and we would go and do things. One of the most memorable ones was, at the time, they had a curfew at like 11 p.m. because of COVID. And if you got caught after there, then you could go to jail. And some of the coworkers were like, hey, let's get some burgers, some fries, and let's just go float in the Dead Sea at 9:30, 10 p.m. And I was like, okay, if you say it's good, we'll do this. But like, it was one of my most memorable experiences, just hanging out with these people that I met in the restaurant, enjoying these burgers, floating in the Dead Sea at the middle of the night with the worry of like, oh, am I going to get arrested or not kind of situation.
You are brave.
Yeah.
Or
so,
you were just very young. Either way.
We learn the most from our mistakes. So I was making them all, but they all ended up working out in my favor. So
how long were you there?
I was there for about 3 to 4 weeks, so about a month.
Okay. And so this was a chain with multiple locations.
It was unique in that the burger restaurant, I believe, had 2 locations, but the way the actual company worked was more of like, if you're more familiar with the industry of like a commissary kitchen, where everything is produced in one location and then they ship it out to each different location to actually just utilize on there. So they don't need the prep area, they just need the cooking area. And because of this, they actually had different brands underneath. So like one was like a chicken brand, one was a pizza brand, one was a burger, and they were making everything fresh from their like commissary kitchen. They were making their bread themselves and everything, which
Wow.
I come to learn bread is a huge thing over there, and it is delicious bread. But sometimes I think they use it in the wrong application. Like they're using like Kaiser rolls for their burgers. Not the right in my opinion, but to each.
But they like it.
Yeah, it was good bread,
So you said family was a big focus in Jordan. Is there anything that you learned about around the way people gather around food, whether it was directly in the restaurant or in your other sort of time and experiences? Maybe not floating in the Dead Sea, although that's pretty cool, but maybe in people's homes. Or did you get to observe any of that?
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, I had some extended family over there in Jordan that I didn't really know about. So when I had told some of my family members, they're like, oh, our cousins are over there. So not related by blood, but by connection. I went over there and I met with the family, and they were super welcoming. They had never met me before. This is the first time they had heard of me, and I was just showing up at their door. They cooked me a whole meal, and we spent the next like 2-3 hours just on their back porch area just talking. And by the time I left there, they gave me a whole package of like spices and other little trinkets to take back for my cousins here in the States. So I brought that back for them. They were super welcoming, and I felt that a lot with a lot of the other people I met there. As I mentioned about like half the people being Palestinian there, there's a story that I was told while I was there at the Dead Sea of like, I was with 3 other guys, and they were sitting there talking about their lives, and they're like, yeah, our families are here in Jordan, but like 50 years ago, we weren't here in Jordan. We were over there on the other side of the lake or the sea. And like our parents still have the keys to the home, but we are never allowed to return there. So I think a lot of that really stems into that family unit in which they have this strong connection of being displaced from their home, and the only people who are there to support them are themselves and their families. So they created these strong family networks or generational families to build up and continue to grow in their society.
Yeah, it's interesting. As part of the series, I also talked to a woman who's a professor who studies migration and displacement and did a project. She was from Sri Lanka, about her family's displacement and food and how that's changed. And I think one of the super interesting things is how there can be silver linings in migration and displacement. In her story, in Sri Lanka, the men never cooked. It was like only the women cooked. And in the United States now, many of these men cook and not only love it, but they're actually more inventive and they have more fun with it because they get to do it, where the women have less joy in sort of the exposition of it, if that makes sense, because it was like their gender role. So there can be these like really powerful and interesting changes that come out of displacement and migration, even though it's so difficult. I think it is interesting to hear those stories and think about how change is always hard, but it can sometimes be good. Good things can come from it, you know?
Yeah, there's always a silver lining. Like there's two sides to every coin, and even though something is really bad, there's usually a good side that comes from it, whether it's now or later in the future, and you just never know what that's going to be.
Maybe for these people it is the family, like the intensity of the family connection. Who knows? Okay, so then you came back, and is that when you got involved with Class Act, or tell us about Class Act?
So following being in Jordan, that was right at the end of when I was at the two restaurants that I was opening up. Because it was COVID, I really got burnt out from cooking. To be honest, I actually lost my passion for cooking working at that restaurant. So kind of going to Jordan was like my Hail Mary to be like, hey, let me do something else and change my life right before I leave, you know? So I come back and I actually quit that job. I didn't work for like a month or two because I was dead inside. I was like, all I've ever done is food. I don't know what I'm going to do. And about a month in, I started sending out my resume, doing interviews and whatnot. And I had stacked up probably like 8 different interviews with different companies, from like writing food blogs to teaching cooking classes to working in restaurants as a manager. What I ended up doing actually was going and teaching cooking classes, which was kind of like the furthest thing from what anyone who knew me probably would have thought. When you meet me, I'm a very quiet person. It usually takes me about 3 interactions to really open up and start talking. So for me to teach cooking classes and have to use like a very projective voice was very, very counterculture to what people believed me to be. But I did that for about 2-3 months before I had applied back to the place I interned at, which is that corporate research job that I mentioned. I did that for about 3 years, also teaching cooking classes on the weekends. During this whole time, all of this really does connect back to Class Act, in that back when I was opening those 2 restaurants, right before we opened, one of the investors, who was a doctor, had come in, and he had come in with someone who was trying to sell him medical equipment. That person who was trying to sell him medical equipment later became one of my best friends and the one who I partnered with to open up the restaurant. He somehow got my number, and ever since then we had stayed in contact. And he eventually moved to Chicago himself, and he quit selling medical equipment. He went full in on a pop-up called Class Act. At the time, it was called Class Act Dining, because you were dining at his apartment. Very similar to the style in which it is currently presently at, but in his apartment, it was only up to 10 people. The menu rotated every single month, different theme. And we would do anywhere from 2 to 8 dinners a month. Sometimes it would get a little higher, but generally speaking, that was around what we did. We would collaborate with different brands, different like whiskey brands, tea brands, coffee brands, while we were doing all this over like a 3-year time span, maybe 4. We would do these dinners, and I would help them out along with one other person. And one of the early on diners who had experienced the Class Act dining, after about a year or 2, came to Nikolai Maldanov, who is my friend and the chef and owner of Class Act. Came up to him and was like, hey, these pop-ups are great. Why don't we actually turn this into a restaurant? You know, you have something, there's something great here, and I want to be a part of it, and I want to see it grow. So from there, a business plan was developed. Money was raised. Then in 2024, I believe it was, I think it was February, a building was purchased. And then construction started right after that. We were hoping to open in the fall, but if anyone knows anything about restaurants and the way they open, they never open on time. For one reason or another, be a contractor, some building thing, licenses, permits, you name it, everything and anything will set back a restaurant. But eventually, by July of last year, Class Act Dining evolved into Class Act. So cutting off the dining, because you're no longer dining in his apartment, you're now dining in our home, which is this building that we had created. So in July, it opened up, and yesterday we actually celebrated the 1-year anniversary party. Yeah. Had a whole slew of people there, industry, friends, families, investors. So it was a hoot.
So tell us a little bit about how Class Act opened in the restaurant space, so not as a pop-up. My understanding is that there are 3 distinct spaces for the evening that everybody is dining together. I don't know if people know each other in advance or not. And I want to hear about not only like how the menu is changing, and I know that the guests can see the chef cooking, so it's like an open space, but I'm also interested in the gathering portion of this. So I've seen in some discussions of the organization that connection and belonging are core values, which I think is not only within the team, but how you sort of embrace the guests and then what you hope guests take away from the experience. So I'm interested to hear about all of that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the original pop-up dinners, the main reason we did it was to bring people together to connect and have a sense of belonging. So that really is the main 2 pillars of what we were doing in the restaurant while we were building it, and what still progresses today. That drives everything that happens within the building. But you're right, it's 3 different rooms that they experience. Chef and owner Nikolai, as well as our CEO Shrina Amin, who is that original diner who came to him. They have dined across the entire globe at more Michelin restaurants than I probably know of anyone else that I know. Super well versed in that aspect of understanding the experiences and how they flow and what really drives people to focus their attention in the way that you want them to. And one of those common aspects found in a lot of the restaurants or experience that were had where people were kind of distracted from actually what they were doing and they were really engrossed in what was going on was a multi-room experience. And I think what really the benefits that come from a multi-room experience is a lot of times, I'm sure you've experienced it, like you go to a restaurant and you sit down at a single table and you leave. So it really limits the amount of exposure or connection or just curiosity that you can have within a space. But when you have multiple rooms, you have 2 separate times where you're going to transition. So there's more times where you can adjust the experience and shift the perspective of guest to be the way that you want it to be, or maybe it's not going the way you want it to, and that transition is a way for you to be like, oh, here's something different. It also gives the guests a reason to question about something. If they're in the first room and they walk past like an interesting bottle of liquor or like a fermentation that's sitting in a jar on the wall, they can kind of point at it and ask about it. They can see little trinkets of things that were included in the restaurant that are very personal to the staff and what really makes us connect among each other. So that 3-room experience really drives that ability for guests to further connect among each other as well as with the staff. That first room is what we call the foyer, which is where they come in, they're greeted by front of house or hospitality, who have done a bunch of research on you and pretty much already kind of know who you are and what you like and what you don't like. And they really exude the knowledge to help you connect with other people. In that first room, everyone's kind of gathering, and until everyone has entered into the experience, they don't move on to the next room. So we like to also think of that as almost like a cocktail hour. You get to mix and mingle with people. And this is really where a lot of times we see people are most hesitant. It's like going to like speed dating, like you walk in the room and you have no idea anyone, and you have to somehow spark up a conversation that's going to make someone interested in you or you interested in them.
So are they all strangers to each other?
It varies. If it's a private party, a lot of times most of them know each other. But for a normal experience, a lot of times it's all strangers outside of like a couple, A lot of times people book in 2s or 3s or 4s. So the table can go up to 16 people. So you could have upwards of 16 random people there, but like usually it's going to be about 8 random groups that are dining at the experience. So it's really hospitality's experience to share the knowledge they know about the guests and connect them among each other before they move to the next room.
So how do they do that? So how do they do the research? I mean, obviously there's a lot you can find online, but it could take maybe with AI that's easier now. Could take some time to find interesting things about people. And then even if you've gathered that information, how is the front of house utilizing that information to sort of nurture these beginning, relationships, frankly?
Yeah. Like I said, they do their preliminary research, and Their research of the guest doesn't stop once they walk in the door. Like, it continues. You'll learn more about a person in the 5 minutes that they are standing in front of you than you will any article you read about them online, kind of thing. So a lot of it comes down to paying attention to the guests, really looking at their cues and understanding how they're feeling that day. There's a lot of tools on the back end as well, like our reservation system most people don't know this, but it does share guests among different restaurants. If restaurants want to allow public access to the notes they have, they can share it among restaurants, or guests will put little notes that they want in there, so you learn stuff from that. They also link you to what they think are their profiles and whatnot, so you can stalk them on their profiles and really figure it out. But sometimes you do end up with a ghost, and those people don't come up, and you're like, who is this? Sometimes they're inspectors, sometimes they're just people who are high value people who want to stay anonymous, kind of situation. Those are the tricky ones where you really have to learn everything about them in person as opposed to beforehand.
Okay, so they have that information. Then what are they doing to facilitate in that first room?
Yeah, it's no different than if you're doing a social gathering. You spark up a random conversation. Maybe the weather is off today. Here in Chicago, oh my God, yesterday the weather was all over the place. It was 4:30, sunny skies, and then 4:45, it looked like a tornado was going to run through here, and it was monsooning. The winds are all over the place. And then by 5:15, sunny again, beautiful as could be, and everyone was the streets are filled with 3 feet of water. You would have never known if you came here at 5:30 what happened an hour ago. Maybe it's their dresses, an interesting color, or where'd you get that dress? And then you get that first initial piece of information that you can then connect to all the information that you already know about them. And then once you have some of that subtle conversation, you can kind of split off, maybe talk to another group, and then you learn about them, and then you can come back and be like, hey, I just found out that this person is, has a dog, a Labrador or something like that, or they just went to Italy and they just had the time of their life. Didn't you say you were just in Italy, kind of thing? And that's how you really get those connections to start and get them to form.
Okay. And then once everybody is there and had some time to spend together, maybe they have a cool cocktail, then you move to the dining area?
Yeah. Then we have 2 sliding doors that open up from the foyer into the main dining room. And you just see this single table with all the seats around it. At the very end of the table, you have our pass, which is the term we use for the countertop that leads to the kitchen, where we put all of our food up to get served. And there, it's an open kitchen. You can see everything we're doing, everything we're saying, everyone we're looking at. In the current experience, you walk up to the counter and you actually take your first bite, and you learn about the ingredients that are getting utilized in the current menu. So the current menu is called One, and it focuses on a single ingredient per course. So each one is laid out. Chef Nikolai will talk about where the items are sourced from, why we're using them, and how we're highlighting them in the menu as we go through, and that progression through the menu. So you get that visual cue along with some additional little nuggets of information that go along with it before you sit down. And it is open seating. We encourage people to sit down wherever they want. The way I like to explain it is that first room is really the room where you get to understand who you want to sit next to, and also who you don't want to sit next to. Granted, you're sitting at the same table, but if you don't want to sit next to someone, you can really put yourself far away from them, and you don't have to talk to them, which we've seen. Some people have their motives, but generally speaking, most of the time people are picking who they were chatting with in the first room. They're sitting next to them, and they fill in the rest, kind of situation. And then you kind of get the outlier sometimes, who you'll get a very, very expressive person who wants to go around and just do ring around the rosy or whatever, where he just asks everyone their name and what they do and how they can connect.
Okay, and then how many courses is the meal? Is dessert served in the dining area or in the next room?
Yeah, dessert is served at that dining table, so the courses vary. Generally speaking, it's around 10 to 12 right now. With that being said, the portion sizes are adjusted based on how many courses.
Right, of course.
We do have a secret at the end that you get for this specific reason. When we were running it as a pop-up out of Nikolai's apartment, one of our biggest gripes when we go to fine dining restaurants is we'd pay all this money, we'd have this grand experience, but then we'd leave and we go to the local hot dog stand and get a hot dog. So when we were running the pop-up, we would do what we would call just, I'm blanking on the name right now, but essentially it was just endless food. So at the end of the meal, we would open up the kitchen and we're going to make this one item, be it rice bowls or tacos or something. And we're like, raise your hand if you're hungry, and we'll just keep sending you food, and you tell us when you're not hungry anymore. We've translated a similar form of that into the tasting menu at the end. It's a little bit of a surprise, so I'm not going to explain any more on that. But yeah, that's definitely one way that we manage the hunger as well.
Okay. So then once that surprise is over, then you move into the third space?
Yep. So we have a speakeasy built on the back side of the building, accessible separately at any time as well. You just walk right in there. But at the end of the dining experience, you do get a section booked off for y'all to experience for about 45 minutes. If you want a little more time, you can always book a little longer extra time separately. Maybe that person you were sitting next to at the table really wasn't the best person you wanted to be sitting next to, and maybe 3 seats down you wanted to chat a little bit more with that person. But if the experience was over by then, you'd all be going home. The speakeasy really gives another room for you to connect with some other people if you wanted to do that, or like share your contacts. A lot of times that's where we see people exchanging their phone numbers. They're making more plans to come back or go to other dinners or go get drinks or even like go on trips somewhere else in the world we've heard of before as well. So we really get to see those connections really strengthen at the end and see how they've fully built and what they want to do next afterwards. So they get a little shot over there as a little thank you, a little goodbye, a digestive with the chef, and they're welcome to leave if they want, but they do have that 45 minutes to sit down, enjoy another cocktail at the end of the meal, and just enjoy themselves.
So you just had the 1-year anniversary. And I don't know how many you were doing the pop-up for 2 to 3 years, I think you said. So what have you learned? Has anything changed in the year you've been in this permanent space? And or what's working really well and you love about it? No, and I don't mean you, I mean all of you, like the team.
Yeah, it's always a team effort with a lot of the things we do. It's tricky because adapting this type of concept from an apartment to a restaurant where you create repetition that's consistent at a high quality is always the most difficult part. Going from 2 to 8 dinners a month in a very manicured place is a lot easier than doing it twice a night, 5 days a week, with all these unknown variables where you have dietary restrictions. Sometimes that pop up when they walk in the door and you got to scramble to make your adjustments. So it's I think that transition of how do we make the experience we were creating before the same and better in the restaurant experience, and also like how do we present things to guests in a way that we can make them feel like they're in our home like they were previously in the pop-up. I think one of the biggest hurdles that's still there is, when you go and dine at the end of a dining experience, there's always a check dropped. And it's like, how do you navigate something like that? Because when you go to a family gathering, like, I don't know, your grandma's not dropping a check in front of you and being like, hey, pay up for the...
But why can't you just have them pay in advance? So, I mean, I understand tipping and maybe you want to manage that, but there are certain very high-end experiences where you do pay in advance and then you don't have that sort of like I'm paying at the end and I don't like that feeling. Or sometimes I'm also like, why are you asking me like for another tip or for like, there's this like awkward feeling about that. Yeah. So if there could be a way to front load that and just say, typically people leave X, like whatever, it could be a standard. Presumably it's a fixed amount for dinner. Or maybe not because of drinks, so that may be complicated.
Yeah, the drinks is always the variable on how much extra they're going to pay. We did test out charging the full price up front before they arrived, but the problem with opening a new restaurant with like a very minimal name behind it, like not being like a TV chef star,
Right.
There's a connotation that you need to like build the respect first before you can charge that value. So
yeah,
we did test it. It didn't work out that great. So we just switched back over to like, I think it's $100 deposit up front, which is reasonable. And then you pay the rest once you come in. But we do slide in the check along with a little snack on the side. So it's more of a, here's something sweet and something, I don't know, you may take it as sweet, but we do need a payment. So
right.
That's kind of how we bridge it right now. Maybe in the future when there's more notoriety to the place and it's been around for a couple of years can switch back to that upfront cost. So it's much more personal when you come in. You don't really have to worry about the bill.
I wanted to ask, are people who are working there still passionate about it? I know, like, you burnt out on, and obviously it was a very different kind of restaurant experience, but, we read about that, we hear about that. It's a hard industry. You're working nights, you're working late, and the mission is like super powerful, but you have to keep your passion for it. So has that been a challenge, or is that not a challenge?
Yeah, it's always a challenge. I think the strongest restaurants are always built on a family aspect, but at the end of the day, like it is also a business, so like it does need to be profitable at the end of the day. So it's finding a balance between the two. Generally speaking, though, chef and owner Nikolai is probably one of the most passionate and dedicated people I know. I've watched him go on 3-4 day benders just to figure out how to create a recipe. So having that foundational leader be so passionate about something helps to really drive the passion of everyone else and really reassure the commitment to the actual vision and goal of what is trying to be done there. So,
and is there an opportunity? I just remember in like my kids' schools, there would be opportunities for teachers over the summer to do like enrichment. So something like that they felt would help them. It doesn't have to be sort of like directly on point with what they were teaching or whatever. Is there an opportunity for staff to do that? So to avoid burnout, sort of like take a mini sabbatical and go learn about an ingredient that you're curious about, or like creating cocktails, or like, I don't know.
Yeah, definitely. As part of some more foundational goals, like we've looked at the industry, and a big issue with the industry, like you said, is burnout. We really wanted to create an environment that was equitable for everyone. So you have that work-life balance and you're able to do what you need to. Built into everyone's contract is 4 weeks of time off. 2 of those is decided by the restaurant when the restaurant just chooses to close for a whole week, 2 times a year. And then another 2 weeks where you get to choose at your own leisure when you want to take off. Whenever we get some new vendors or we're working with a new farm kind of situation, we usually try to go out there and connect with those people who are producing the products and understand the process from start to finish. So we'll invite the whole team out there to go. Whoever shows up, shows up. We always recommend everyone show up, whether you're, even if it's a liquor tasting and you work in the kitchen, like you can use liquor for everything and anything, and vice versa. So, and even like there's a positive to also visiting the vendors, in which they have items there that they aren't going to put in their catalog. They're not going to sell or outright market kind of situation. So when you go there, you get to understand there's very secret items that you can specialize and get for yourself that other places don't have. So creating that relationship with our vendors also helps a lot with our training.
Over the last year, what would you say, like, is there an evening or an experience that was very memorable because of the experience the guests had either that night or the follow-up? Like, I'm interested in what you're hearing from guests afterwards as well. What if there's like a takeaway on this communal food experience that you can share?
I mean, I talked a lot about how they form the connections and how they carry those on past the dinner experience. For me personally, I don't think there's any one thing that jumps out particularly. A lot of this is second nature. It's what I do. I'm notorious for being the person who's friends with the friend's friend's friend kind of situation. I like to really just spiderweb things, is the way I put it. And when I look back on people who I know, I like to really connect, like, oh, I met this person who then introduced me to this person who introduced me to this person. Now they're in my friend group, but somehow comes back together at the end. And I've also met a lot of people who are adjacent to that. You meet that third person and somehow you're like, oh, like my best friend actually knows your partner or some other situation like that. And you're like, I was actually closer to you than I thought I was. And then I think that helps a lot with also forming connections. A lot of that I tried to translate into the restaurant when I was there as well, helping people and seeing how they can connect in a better way. A lot of people don't see connections up front, even though they're a lot closer than what they would imagine being.
Yeah, interesting. So I'm interested to hear, You've got Class Act on one side that's like fine dining, a very thoughtful experience on connection. And then on the other side, you've got large chain restaurants. Many, but not all of them, are fast food. I'm wondering for you personally, with a background in food science and nutrition and family dinners and all the things that have been important to you in your life, do you feel like the chain restaurants are fulfilling that for people?
The sense of community and connection.
Yeah, and gathering in food quality and, all, nutrition, all of the things.
I think in the US there's not a huge drive towards that connection via person to person when you look at it from a food chain aspect. I think a lot of it is focused towards selling things. And as we sit in our day and age with tons of technology around us, a lot of the systems that we utilize push us more and more towards a isolated experience, I think. So I don't think chains are moving towards community and connection, which is sad, but it is how the world is right now. I wish it was different. It does bother me. That's really why I joined Class Act full time, because I was in corporate before. It's a nice, cushy job. And I really resonated with the vision that we were trying to do. The whole aspect of the restaurant is to connect and have a sense of belonging and really reestablish that connection among people that they're losing present day due to technology. When I was in Jordan, it felt like I was in like the early 2000s again, where like the internet was just coming around and people were using phones, but it wasn't like as prevalent. It wasn't as much as a distraction versus here in the US, where it's like everyone uses their phone every single day. I was looking up some stats earlier where it was like, I think 80 to 90% of people, touch their phone within the first 10 minutes of the day. And like 50% of people on average will use their phone while eating. So like, just think of that. Like when you go out and sit down, even at like an experience like ours, like if you have 50% of your people touching their phones while they're eating, they're really not connecting with the people around you. So really you're only serving 8 people, you're only connecting with 8 people. So really try and break that off from the status quo that is happening in the US right now with the restaurant. I like I said, I don't see that happening with chain restaurants and the corporate side. And it's hard to change that. A lot of it's built on institutional industries that control everything we do, so where profit is usually number one for them.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess, you said this earlier, like in corporate, you're giving people what they want, and that's what they want, or yeah. I would actually posit that's what they think they want. Do you know for chain restaurants, like percentage-wise, take out, like carry away versus eat in?
When you're looking at chain restaurants, it's much higher. It drives a lot of their business. I don't know the exact percentage, but it is a huge driver, especially over the last couple of years, where you see like companies like Uber or DoorDash really pushing their delivery. I know at the restaurant downstairs, DoorDash just acquired a new platform that is focusing around reservations. I believe it's called 7 Rooms. And they're really just trying to put high-end restaurants on there right now, which sounds weird, right? Having like a Michelin star restaurant on DoorDash and you can book it, like that's weird.
I don't see how that works. But
I don't know, but they're doing it right now.
Well, to me, it just harkens back to everything Ken was saying about the family dinner dying, and we're so busy. And I think in the United States, we actually are so busy. Like our jobs require much more of us than in many other places in the world. Although this is a trend he saw globally, unfortunately. So it was not sort of just in the United States. But we also, when I was a kid, I played sports, but my kids played on like travel teams. Like it was like a whole another level where the family dinner is disrupted. So I feel like it is like a tide we're pushing against, which is why I love Class Act so much, because it's this respite from this tide that we're pushing against, and a reminder that like there's a different way to live, and frankly we can all do it in our own homes. Like it's beautiful to hear Ken talk. He loves to cook and he cooks every day, and it's like this gift, right? It's this gift when we cook for ourselves or for other people. And I'm trying to like remember that and re-find the joy in the process of cooking. And I think many people feel like it's a gift when you feed people, but the creation of the food and the slowing down and like knowing where the food comes from and all of those things, it's a pretty beautiful and powerful thing. And then you have the added benefit of learning how to sit around the table and disagree, and that it's okay. We can still love each other and disagree. Like, we don't have to agree on everything. So there's so much we're losing that things like Class Act to me are just this like spot of brilliance that we need to hold on to.
Yeah, I think as we progress as a society, I don't think we're going to get any more social in the aspect of like using less technology. So I think Class Act will stay as like a bubble in itself and really act as like it's like a third space, Maybe one day they'll not allow phones in the restaurant kind of situation. Yeah. And it truly does become a third space. So it's something unique that you don't see in many other places. And it brings people together with food. I like to think of food as like a universal currency. It's something that we all need. We know the value in it. And no matter the language you speak, where you come from, your background, your ethnicity, what you like, what you don't like, at the end of the day, we all need to eat.
And Ken actually talks about food as a language, which I also love, and what food you're preparing, eating, serving is saying something about who you are and what you believe in. And I think that that's true as well, and a good reminder. Okay, if every restaurant in America could adopt just one thing you've learned about fostering connection, what would you hope it would be?
For restaurants, the takeaway, it's not going to be a specific answer, because I think when I think of restaurants that I'm like, I love and I go back to all the time, a lot of it is because they found a way to make me feel like a friend or like I was welcome there. So really figuring out how to make guests your friends, or at very least make them feel like they're your friends in some way. And I think that will subsequently lead to like generational business. I don't know about you, but like there's definitely restaurants that I grew up with that my parents like love beyond anything else. And like we just keep going back there. And for some reason, there's a soft part in that place in my heart as well to go back there and eat. But like if I were to go back there, I'd be like, it's not the best food. I just come here because it's like generational and like I feel like family here. So really understanding what that niche is and how you can translate that to your guests. And that's going to be different for every restaurant.
Yeah, but that's so interesting. So my family went to Greece this summer, and we were in Athens, and we were asking like, where can I go have a gyro? And anyway, we were told this one place in Athens, and it was so clearly like a family-run place with the people who worked there. It was not a fancy place at all, but it was like so warm and so welcoming that it was such a memorable experience. But there was two women sitting close to us, and the owner, who was this old man, like sends over some wine for them, and you could see that there is this community among the people who are going there all the time, and that's just beautiful. I love this idea of, you're unlikely going to be a friend. You can't have so many friends, but to make somebody feel like a friend or family or like you matter, right? Like,
yeah.
Really.
There's a diner here in Chicago called Arts Diner, and it's been around for I think like 30 years or maybe more. And they just revamped their place to look like a nice retro diner. And you walk in there, and the owner's still there, and it's this older Greek guy, and he'll talk your ear off, and like the first time I walked in, it was funny because I walk in and I'm waiting to order, and an order comes up for this couple that's at the counter, and they're like, oh, we wanted this to go. And he goes, why would you want that to go? It's such good food. Why take it home and let it get cold? Sit down, eat it here, kind of situation. And I was like, that was just so genuine and like heartwarming to see that. And he really translated that energy to me as well while I was there. So I keep going back there. The food is delicious, but I go back there to see him. So.
That's amazing. I love that. Okay, here are my 5 questions. As we explore in my brand Amatand, which is French for to take care of your soul. Objects can hold a lot of meaning for us. They can tie us to the past, enable us to be more present, or sometimes even take us into the future. Can you share an object from your life, whether you still have it or not, and explain the meaning that it holds for you?
Yeah, I'm going to use more of a blanket statement here to answer this question because I have a lot of things. I'm very sentimental of very small things that people give me. Like one of my best friends from high school gave me this weird little purple whale that's plastic. It's almost like a bath toy, but I still have it. She gifted it to me, and it's just something that reminds me of her, and it's just a good time in my life. I have a bunch of those little trinkets laid on my wall over there. And then another thing I always do whenever I travel, I always try and find the most unique looking rock I can find where I'm traveling, like a little small one. And then I bring it back home, and I have a rock collection. It was funny, the last time I went to move, I had a friend helping me, and a box fell off of what she was carrying, and it goes down all the stairs, down an entire flight of stairs. And she goes, "Oh no, I hope I didn't break it. What was it?" And she opens it, and I go, "Oh, it's just my box of rocks." So
I think it's great. The reason I ask this question is that I think objects are just vessels for memories. So whatever the object somebody chooses is, there's a very strong memory tied to it. So your rocks are memories of all of your trips. I talked to a woman who studies scent and how if you wear a certain cologne or perfume on a vacation and you only wear it there, then if you wear it a year later, you're brought back to that place. And it's wonderful to hear the things that people carry with them and why. So can you share a favorite tradition? It could be something from when you were a kid. It could revolve around food or not. Anything at all.
yeah, I try and be, despite the last thing we just talked about, I try to hold little value in the objects I have, aside from those little trinkets. The main thing that drives me in my life is making other people happy and really having that connection with them. So once a year between Thanksgiving and Christmas every year, I'll go through my contacts and I will send a personalized message to every single person who has made a difference in my life that year. And I've been doing this for the last 8 or 9 years. And when I first started, it only took me about 4 hours. And I was like, yeah, I can do this. I'm going to keep doing it. And 8, 9 years later, it takes me about 20 hours every year cumulatively to get all these messages out. But the responses I get from them and just the resounding appreciation for expressing my appreciation for those people is always rewarding. I think a lot in our present day, we don't express how much we care about the people around us as often as we should. And a lot of times those people who change your life are there and then they're gone before you know it, and you've never expressed how much they meant to you while they were in your life. So I like to keep that tradition going through my life.
That's amazing. That's one I've never heard, and it is really beautiful. So I hope you do continue to do that. And I think we can all do that also on a smaller scale. In a given week, you could just choose one person and tell them it was so, whatever it was that they did for you or said to you or how meaningful it happened to be for you in that particular week. And sometimes we don't know what other people are going through, and a very small thing can have a big impact on people.
Yeah, I've definitely gotten some very heartfelt responses being I really needed this, so it's definitely interesting to see. And
okay, well, hopefully more people will do that. We haven't talked about this, so I know you burnt out on cooking. I don't know if you're cooking at home now, but are you in a phase in your life where you enjoy entertaining in your home? Why or why not?
I wouldn't say burnt out on cooking. I'm probably back to 50% of where I was. I was definitely a lot more passionate. I was also a lot more younger and naive of the world. So I do still cook. I do eat out a lot being in Chicago. There's tons of restaurants always opening, so I go out and eat a lot as of recent. As far as entertaining though, working in restaurants, it takes up a lot of your time. You're minimum working 60 hours a week usually, so, and the extra time you do have is usually just I'm trying to check out and recover to go back into work kind of situation. So while I was working at the restaurant over the last year, I didn't have too much time to really entertain people. But now that I've transitioned, there's definitely a plan to pick up on hosting people and doing events again. So
do you think you'll pull from Class Act any of the little things that you're doing when you do that in your own home, on a small scale?
Yeah, I mean, everything you do always bleeds into the rest of your life somehow, whether you know it or not.
That's a fair point. Do you have one or two top resources? They could be books, websites, podcasts, anything at all. It doesn't have to be related to food or restaurants or anything. Sometimes people just share their favorite books because we have a lot of listeners who like to read, and I love to read, so I love getting book recommendations too. So it could just be like, this is my favorite book of all time.
Yeah, I'll give you a more general one to start. Like usually like my friends and books are like my main resources for things. The books really dive into a lot of topics a lot better than I can find in most other places, like online or even on social media. Like you're not going to get the very detailed orientation breakdowns that you would find anywhere else. So books are always like my end all be all when I want to know something and understand it to its deepest sense. Like for example, I was trying to make makgeolli in the restaurant over the last year, so I purchased a book from Korea that is only in Korean, and I just Google translated the photos to figure out how to make this makgeolli, and it came out well, and it got served as the finisher shot in the restaurant downstairs.
That's a drink?
Yeah, it's a rice-based drink that is fermented with, it's almost like like a koji yeast mixture. It's called naruk, but it can be a combination of wheat and rice that's has like a fungus on it. And you toss that in with the rice, and I added some blood orange juice in there and let that ferment for a couple weeks and made some alcohol out of it. So books are definitely like my end all be all when it comes to like the gospel of the knowledge I want to learn. Friends are great. They're always like, that's the written experience that you don't read about, you know, the traditions that you talk about around the table. Oh, I burned this food doing it this way, but when I did it this way, it worked out. And then I guess like specific books, the one I've been giving out a lot lately is called The Pumpkin Plan. I've mentioned it to like 2 or 3 people in the last month because they've come to me talking about some things relating to this book. And it really focuses around how to drive business in an efficient way. And it covers the topic of farmers who grow world record pumpkins. And it's the concept that you start growing pumpkins and then you find a pumpkin that's growing really large and you go, all right, I'm going to take those seeds from that pumpkin and next year I'm going to grow those seeds and I'll end up with large pumpkins. And yeah, your pumpkins will be bigger. And from that vine that you have those larger pumpkins growing, you go, which one is the largest one that's growing? And slowly you start cutting off all the heads of the pumpkins that are smaller until all the nutrients kind of funnels into those larger pumpkins. And eventually you end up with, you know, record-breaking seeds to grow the largest pumpkins in the world, and you're doing super well. And it translates that over into business, in which, you know, sometimes at the beginning you got to grow all the pumpkins to figure out which ones are going to be good, or you got to take in all the clients and just say yes to everything. And as you keep growing, you have to be a little bit more selective in the way in which you do business and the way you grow, so that you can be the most profitable and most efficient in the way you do things. Because sometimes as you grow as a business, that customer that you started with may take 90% of your time but give you 10% of your profit, versus one that takes 10% of your time gives you 90% of your profit. So it's like, what is that trade-off, and when is the time to cut your losses and really focus on what's important in your life? So
Last question. What do you do for yourself? Do you have a practice, a focus, a habit, or daily routine that contributes to your success or well-being? You've had burnout, you work a lot, and you give to others a lot. So what do you do for yourself?
yeah, I wrote one thing down, and that's the main thing that drives me on a daily basis, and that's just doing one productive thing each day. That's just like a self-fulfillment thing to say, like, I'm getting better every day. And there's the saying of like, a lot of small victories eventually lead into one large victory. So it's a compounding growth thing. So just doing one thing that I personally, from my perspective, view as being productive is usually how I am successful in my life. And the other thing, more on a macro scale, it's been pretty consistent. About every 3 years, I change my whole life.
Whoa, okay.
So I end up with like this very catastrophic event, more so like catastrophic in my mind, of like, oh, I need to change everything I'm doing because I'm not happy, and just do something new. So usually that ends with me going on a trip somewhere for like a couple weeks, and then I come back and I'm like, I'm doing something different. I don't want to do this anymore. And then I pursue something else, and it cycles in 3 years usually. So,
but I do think it's a really, really good reminder that we can always make a change. So many of us, I think, get stuck for lots of good reasons. Like, we have a good stable job that's supporting our family, or geographically we can't move, or or we're scared or we don't know what we would do or where we would go. But I think it's a great reminder that we can always change. We have one of the very first things we developed was like these little cocktail napkins, and one of them says you can go anywhere from anywhere, and it's just a good reminder we can always pivot. So I think it's a great reminder. Most people don't do that every 3 years, but kudos to you. Alphonse, it's been great talking to you. Thank you so much for joining me. I know listeners are going to learn a lot from this.
Yeah, it was a great time being here.
On the Table with Ashley is presented by Amatonde, an elevated, everyday, luxury home and tableware brand with products designed to cultivate connection. You can learn more about Amatonde at ametendre.com or on Instagram at Amatonde. By subscribing to our newsletter on the Amatonde website, you'll receive updates on new episodes as well as promotions relating to Amatonde and Amatonde's products. Send us an email at reachoutanytime@amatonde.com if you have ideas for guests or series ideas you'd like to pass along. Thanks for listening.